Then John Boehner ought to follow his advice now.
No, his advice now is not so good.
We will leave this live and take you live back to the House floor for further debate.
Sir, pursuant to the permission granted in Clause 2H of Rule 2 of the Rules of the U.S. House of Representatives, the clerk received the following message from the Secretary of the Senate on September 30th, 2013 at 10:00 p.m. that the Senate disagreed to the amendment of the House to the amendment of the Senate to the joint resolution, House Joint Resolution 59. Signed sincerely, Karen L. Haas.
What purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I send to the desk a privileged report from the Committee on Rules for filing under the rule.
The clerk will report the title.
Report to accompany House Resolution 368, resolution relating to consideration of the joint resolution, House Joint Resolution 59, making continuing appropriations for fiscal year 2014 and for other purposes.
Referred to the House calendar, ordered printed. What purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, by direction of the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 368 and ask for its immediate consideration.
Clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 63, House Resolution 368, resolved that the House hereby, 1, takes from the Speaker's table the joint resolution, House Joint Resolution 59, making continuing appropriations for fiscal year 2014 and for other purposes, with a House amendment to the Senate amendment thereto. 2, insist on its amendment, and 3, request a conference with the Senate thereon. Section 2, any motion pursuant to Clause 4 of Rule 22 relating to House Joint Resolution 59 may be offered only by the Majority Leader or his designee.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 hour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for the purpose of the debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentlewoman, my friend, the ranking member of the Rules Committee from New York, Mrs. Slaughter Penny, which I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Without objection, and the gentleman from Texas is recognized for as much time as he wishes to consume.
Mr. Speaker, during consideration of this resolution, all time is yielded for the purpose of debate only. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection, so ordered.
House Resolution 368 directs the House of Representatives go to conference with the Senate to resolve differences between the two chambers on how to appropriately fund the federal government. Like any other time the House goes to a conference, Mr. Speaker, the minority will have an opportunity to instruct conferees and have their ideas heard. For nearly 3 weeks, this body, the United States House of Representatives, has made numerous legitimate efforts to find a compromise to avoid a government shutdown. Unfortunately, Senate Majority Leader Mr. Reid and Senate Democrats have been unwilling to negotiate and have stonewalled any attempt to find common ground. No one wants a government shutdown, but Mr. Reid's unwillingness to work with House Republicans to find a solution is what brings us to a point now this evening. I know that we want to get our work done tonight. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on the rule, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Texas reserves the balance of his time. Gentlelady from New York is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman for yielding me the customary 30 minutes. Yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentlelady from New York is recognized for as much time as she wishes to consume.
Thank you, sir. Let me be clear. The proposal before us is nothing but another way to run out the clock. I think while we're speaking here, just a little while, we will find in 20 minutes and 21 minutes, because I think we'll go 1 minute after midnight, that this government will shut down. This amazing government that we are supposed to be overseeing, America, United States, can't manage its business and shows to the rest of the world that over the fact that trying to stop a bill you hate, that is the law of the land, that has been already verified by the Supreme Court as to its constitutionality, and where our president won election handily when this was the main idea. I don't believe anymore that this is the product of a few people with strange ideas. This is the Republican Party. I think people who have the news gene that I do, that every idle moment I have to be finding out what's going on in the world, was quite stunned to watch a caucus or Republican conference over and the members coming out absolutely gleeful, many of them expressing glee. One of them said he was almost giddy with joy about closing down the House. Earlier this evening, I saw after the 2010 election some new members who were saying, this was again on news, that their intention was to shut down the House. Well, they've done it. Any time we could have taken up a clean bill from the Senate, all we had to do was vote for that Senate amendment resolution and pass that here, which could have done easily with bipartisan votes. It would then have gone to the President of the United States. And government workers could sleep easier tonight if we'd done that. They're not going to have to worry about paying the rent, or going to be able to buy groceries, or be able to pay the tuition for their child in college. What we are doing to the psyche of America, not we, I'm not going to say that again, the universal we, what the Republicans are doing to the psyche of America will be a long time in healing. I think the absurdity knows no bounds, and we want to say again that if anybody has any mistaken notions that the Democrats were involved in this, there are no Democrat fingerprints on any of these bills. I say that again. Democrats had no input at all at any time on what any of these bills were going to say in the greatest matter before the House of Representatives to keep the government going, to meet our obligation to fund the government. In fact, by cutting out the people's representatives on my side of the House, almost half the people in the United States, voices were stilled throughout this whole process. The only time we got to talk was when we were up here, and we were trying to run and catch up to see what was going on. We had no idea what this was about, that this was coming tonight. We were able to pick up bits and pieces maybe off the floor and hints, and people pass around some things that maybe they heard, but the whole Democrat side has been shut out, not just on this measure, but almost everything in the world that we have done in this term, and it is in last term as well. Now, I don't want anybody to forget that, because everybody's going to yell, if something goes wrong here, they're going to try to blame it on us. It's not on us. I've never seen anything like this. And in addition, for well over 6 months, this Democrat side has begged, cajoled, done everything that they could to try to get this House to appoint conferees and to go to conference with the Senate of the United States on bills that each chamber had already passed. We couldn't do the farm bill. We can't do much of anything. And I said earlier today, one of the reasons is sequestration, so that when we got through one or two appropriations bills, they'd run out of money, and there was no way in God's earth we could have ever done the 12 that we needed to do. But even that hasn't caused any idea of changing what we're doing. And we want to be a part of that. We would like to take the 6 weeks, and imagine in one hand we're appointing conferees for a 6 weeks measure, when we wouldn't do it for the budget of the federal government. Now, we would like to be as much a part of it as we can. We're trying to deal with the debt limit, and certainly to do away with the sequestration that even my friend Mr. Rogers, the chair of the Appropriations Committee, said was far too draconian, and that this government would be seriously underfunded. But tonight, here we are, tragically here, and let me see now, it's 15 minutes and away from time where it will be useless. So I'm not going to say anything more about we could take up another bill, we could pass it, we'd go to the President, we'd sign, we could avoid it. It's simply too late. And if anybody believes this was not the plan, how could you, with any common sense at all, think that as we have moved inexorably to this point, without changing from the left to the right, we're moving ahead, throwing up every kind of thing on a clean CR that would kill it when it arrived at the Senate. And we're hearing, and maybe I hope it's not true, that when we get to the debt limit in about 2 weeks, that the Christmas list that they want to pass, everything that they've wanted all their lives and couldn't get, again, holding the country hostage is what we have ahead of us. Now, given a clear choice between serving our country and serving our ideology within these ranks, the majority has chose to stand against the country and shut the government down. Make no mistake about it, there is going to be a lot of hurt. But at this point, all I can do is urge everyone on our side of the House to vote no for no other reason because of the rules of the House being broken and regular order being so far from reality. In fact, this rule, the rules of the House say that any member can call for a vote on the Senate bill. But this rule takes that away from everybody but the majority leader. Only the majority leader can call for that vote. Very little is left to our side except to vote no and to express our great displeasure and hope to goodness that when this is over and all that pain is out there, that we can move as quickly as possible to try to right this dreadful wrong that is about to land on the American people. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from New York reserves her time. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, I hope we really find a way to avoid that by agreeing to a conference. I think a conference is important. The United States House of Representatives will be on a vote here in a few minutes where we're asking for that. I believe the American people see what we're doing is trying to legislatively resolve the differences that we have. As you know, Mr. Speaker, our first CR was a clean CR at sequester levels and simply defunding Obamacare. Our second CR was a clean CR at sequester levels with a one-year delay of the entire Obamacare law. And the third CR was a clean CR with one-year delay of the individual mandate and removal of certain benefits for members and congressional staff. I have, during these times, found that some of the wise counsel that I have received in the deliberations that I have had and the duties and responsibilities as the chairman of the Rules Committee leaned upon several people. One of them is here, the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Hal Rogers. Hal Rogers has provided me, and I hope I have provided him some bit of working knowledge of what we were trying to accomplish, a desire to accommodate House and Senate members to complete more work on appropriations. That is still a part of the goal that we're going to tonight, to go to conference so that we can fund the government and get it done right. And, Mr. Speaker, this time I'd like to yield 3 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from Kentucky, the gentleman of the Appropriations Committee, Mr. Rogers.
The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Chairman, thank you for those kind words. And it's likewise. I have relied upon the gentleman for advice all through this process as well, and I appreciate his leadership in this body, especially as chairman of the very important Rules Committee. The Senate has just rejected the House's third attempt to avoid a government shutdown. This body has voted time and time again to keep the lights on in our government and to stop the train wreck that is Obamacare. Unfortunately, our colleagues in the Senate have rejected these offers and have refused to come to the table to find a solution. To be absolutely clear, the House has debated and approved 3 separate continuing resolutions. These bills do what they are named for. They continue government. We do not want a shutdown, and we've done what we can to avoid it. Given the situation at hand and the late hour, we will now vote to send the CR we just passed and a request for a conference to the Senate. Our challenges are great, but they are not insurmountable. This conference will provide a venue to discuss the differences between the House and Senate, have productive negotiations, and come to a final agreement that most can support. In some ways, Mr. Speaker, this is a logical next step. When the House and the Senate are unable to resolve their differences on other pieces of critical legislation, the appropriate action is to appoint a conference. That's the time-honored way of this great body. I understand that this is not the first or the second or the third choice of many members here tonight. It's not my first choice either. But I believe this motion can help us move forward and provide at least a gleam of light at the end of this very long tunnel. I urge an aye vote, and I yield back and thank the chairman for the time.
The gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentlelady from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Colorado, a member of the Committee on Rules, Mr. Polis.
The gentleman from Colorado is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, as we watch this train wreck in slow motion, this Republican shutdown of government, I ask myself, in trying to understand what the Republican majority is doing, why are they seeking to close down government? Is it because some of them are against government and want to see it closed? And I think it's been quoted, this is exactly what they wanted. That might be the case for a few of them, Mr. Speaker, but I don't think most Republicans want to abolish the United States of America government. I think that's a position that very few Republicans hold. So why are they closing the government? Now, I understand that many of them don't like the health care reforms, the Affordable Care Act, a law that was passed by the House and Senate, signed by the President, upheld by the Supreme Court. It's the law of the land. Some of them don't like that. You know what? Some Americans are uncomfortable with that. They want to learn more about it. What does it mean for them? How does it help them afford health care? How does it help their families? But the American people don't want to see our government closed down over disagreeing with a particular law. And that seems to be what my friends on the other side are arguing. They're arguing, you know what? We've been unable to repeal this law under the process set up by our Constitution. We've been unable to pass a bill in the House, pass a bill in the Senate, and send it to the President and have the President sign it. We've been unable to follow the Constitution to get what we want. So instead of doing that, we're just going to shut down government until we get what we want. And by the way, we want a lot. We want to change a law that was passed by the House and the Senate and upheld by the Supreme Court that helps middle-class Americans afford health care. We want to change the way that benefits are conducted. We want to change different tax systems. These are all policy discussions to be had through our process. In fact, some of these things have actually been passed by the House of Representatives and either have been rejected by the Senate or are awaiting action in the Senate. But that's the genius of the Founding Fathers in setting up our constitutional system and the separation of powers. It was to provide for a way to pass laws that had broad buy-in from the American people and had the checks and balances that have kept our democracy strong for over 2 centuries. And yet here today, we're short-circuiting that. The Republicans are seeking to say, we're going to close down the entire federal government. This is the most powerful, strongest country that the earth has, the freest democratic nation. We're going to shut down the government. We're going to shut down because we can't pass our laws the way we want them. Well, you know what? The country's had an election. The country's elected a president. This was discussed in the presidential election. This was discussed in Senate elections over and over again. In 5 minutes, the government will shut down. This bill does nothing to prevent that. And until the Republicans change their mind, we won't have an operating federal government.
Gentleman's time has expired.
I yield back to balance on my time.
Time has expired. Chair will receive a message.
Mr. Speaker, a message from the Senate.
Mr. Speaker,
Madam Secretary.
I have been directed by the Senate to inform the House that the Senate has passed S. 1566 to extend the period during which Iraqis who were employed by the United States government in Iraq may be granted special immigration status, in which the concurrence of the House is requested.
Thank you. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, we just entertained a piece of legislation that came from the Senate. There's a lot of business that needs to be done. We had the gentleman, Hal Rogers, chairman of the Appropriations Committee, who was here, who spoke very favorably not only about his optimism of being able to work through this with his colleagues, not only the gentlewoman Anita Lowy, his ranking member, but also the working relationship that the Appropriations Committee has with our Senate colleagues. And I think that if there's one thing that's a takeaway from tonight, and that is that Hal Rogers, a man who's been in this body for a long period of time and who has great wisdom about not only the intricacies in the running of the government, but also, I think, a good bit of esprit that comes with it, not just optimism, but his desire to make sure that good things happen. And that's what Hal Rogers was on this floor talking to us about. Mr. Speaker, at this time I'd like to yield 3 minutes to the distinguished gentleman, member of the Rules Committee from Louisville, Texas, the gentleman, Dr. Michael Burgess.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 3 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, you have to ask yourself, most Americans do understand the concept of fairness. When did fairness become a partisan issue? Certainly tonight, it seems that's the case. Now look, no secret, I've opposed the Affordable Care Act ever since I first heard the first stirrings, the first musings about it in our Energy and Commerce Committee. Opposed it in committee, opposed it here on the floor of the House, opposed the Senate bill that came over to the House. I've opposed it at every opportunity. Yes, there have been multiple attempts to repeal it since the Republicans took the majority in January of 2011. 7 of those times actually got signed and went to the President, or got passed by the Senate and went to the President, and he signed them into law. So there have been some restrictions on the Affordable Care Act over the past 3 years. But honestly, the changes that have occurred to the Affordable Care Act that have been the most dramatic and the most profound are those changes that are brought about by the President himself, by the administration itself. They're sort of like the delayer-in-chief for parts of the Affordable Care Act. I've had constituents email me, text me, and say, what blog post do I need to follow if I'm going to keep up with the changes in the Affordable Care Act? I've had HR directors say, what Twitter feed should I keep up with? I've had other constituents ask me, is there an Instagram place I should look at to keep up with the changes that are occurring in the Affordable Care Act? And we're all familiar with them. We've discussed them the past several days. The fact that the pre-existing condition program, the federal pre-existing condition program that the President and Speaker Pelosi talked about with such high regard, the sign-up window has been closed since February 1st. No one can sign up for the federal pre-existing program. There were supposed to be caps on out-of-pocket expenses starting in 2014. Well, guess what? Those got delayed by a whim. We're all familiar with July 2nd, when on a blog post, the employer mandate was just suddenly set aside, and then 3 days later, all of the reporting requirements were sort of laid at the side. So people are concerned that parts of this law seem expendable, but they just don't know which parts are. But the most egregious one was what happened in the early part of August, right before this body went on back to their district work period, where the fundamental fairness, where a different set of rules were going to apply to members of Congress. And constituents do not understand that. So this week we've had an opportunity to repair that damage, repair that credibility with our constituents. That went over to the Senate tonight, and unfortunately it failed. I wish that it hadn't. Perhaps we could be talking now about the funding of the government to December 15th, and things could continue on as planned. But it didn't work out that way. But this issue of fundamental fairness is not going to go away. It's going to be a recurrent theme. People are going to be asking us questions. Why couldn't we settle on the issue of fundamental fairness and do what's right for the American people, and in the process keep the government open? I thank the gentleman for yielding. I'll yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Texas.
We reserve our time.
Gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentlelady from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, it is now midnight, and the great government of the United States is now closed. I yield 3 minutes. The gentleman from Massachusetts, a member of the Committee on Rules, Mr. McGovern.
The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized for 3 minutes.
I thank the gentlelady for yielding to me. And, you know, this is a joke that we're having this debate at all at this particular time, now that it's midnight and the government is officially shut down. My Republican friends say they're coming here to try to keep the government open. They're here and they're presiding over a Congress that has now shut the U.S. government down. After 6 months of refusing to go to conference on the budget, 18 times. I've been told the Republicans objected to going to conference on the budget with the Senate. Now they say they want a conference committee when it's too late. It's past midnight now. The government has been shut down. This is both cynical and it's disgraceful. Republicans have shut down the government of the United States of America. And I would say to my Republican friends, you own this. This is your shutdown. This represents an absolute failure of your leadership. Real people in this country, your constituents, are going to be hurt by your inability to do your job. Now, the funding levels in the continuing resolution are unbelievably low. They are at your beloved sequester levels. You should be declaring victory that the Senate actually agreed to your low numbers. But that's not enough. That's not enough. You had to overreach. You had to add in the dismantling of the Affordable Care Act and 1,000 other things that were pet projects of the Tea Party right wing in your party. And the fact of the matter is, you knew all along that the President would never sign a bill that dismantled the Affordable Care Act, nor should he, nor would the Senate go along with that, but you did it anyway. You were shutting down this government because you didn't get your way. You didn't get your way, so you're shutting down the government. I would say to my friends on the other side of the aisle that elections in the United States of America still do matter. And your candidate for president lost badly, and this was his #1 issue, to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Your Senate candidates lost badly. And in fact, you lost seats in the House, and the Democrats got 1 million more votes than you did in House elections. But because of some very clever redistricting, you were able to hold on to the majority. The American people rejected your call to overturn the Affordable Care Act, and the American people overwhelmingly do not want you to shut this government down, which you have just done 2 minutes ago. This is the people's house. We're supposed to be doing the people's business. We're not supposed to be doing the business of some right-wing senator from Texas, you know, who somehow wants to run for president and wants to get the Tea Party all excited. I mean, you're supposed to represent your constituents. We all are. We all are. And our constituents, the people of this country, do not want the United States government to shut down. This is a failure of your leadership. And I would say there's one way for us to kind of make things better at this point. Let us bring a clean, continuing resolution to the floor, a clean bill, a clean CR. Even with those low levels that I have some problems with, I guarantee you that it will pass with Democratic votes and Republican votes. We can reverse this shutdown now by bringing a clean, continuing resolution to the floor. Please do it. Please don't shut this government down.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentlelady from New York reserves. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I'd like to yield 3 minutes to one of the clearest thinkers in our party, a second-term member from New York, the gentleman, Congressman Reed.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentleman for yielding. Ladies and gentlemen, let us be clear as to what we did tonight. We sent a request to the United States Senate to simply treat all Americans equally under Obamacare. We sent a request to the Senate, keep the government open, because the President has chosen to give a pass to big business for 1 year. We're asking to give that pass to American individuals for 1 year. The law isn't ready. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle know it's not ready. Why can't we just treat American citizens, individuals, the same as our President, by his executive order, has said big business should get a pass? And most egregiously, why wouldn't you agree with us that members of Congress should not be treated any differently under the law? You know the truth. To my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, Mr. Speaker, members of Congress are getting special treatment under this law because of what Harry Reid and the President did through the OPM. Our contributions for our health insurance premiums as we go into the exchanges are different and not allowed to every other American citizen. So what we stood up for tonight was a simple request. We will keep this government open, but let's just treat American citizens no differently. No special treatment for members of Congress. American citizens no different than big business. Why don't you join us? Why don't you join us in those common sense reforms that Americans across the country are saying, we don't want this law, it's not ready to go, but at a minimum, just treat us the same as big business America. Treat us the same. And don't give members of Congress, yourselves, to my friends across the aisle, special treatment under the law. That simple agreement would have kept the government open. And I hope that you will heed that fundamental call for fairness. But yet, you turn your ear to the American people. And the U.S. Senate turned a deaf ear to the American people and said, we're going to continue the status quo, and that somehow us in Washington, D.C. should be treated differently. I reject that message. I reject that notion. And I stand for equality for all Americans. With that, I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentlelady from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I'm compelled to say that if the members of Congress are going to be treated like everybody else in the country, we would be the only group that's forced not to take our employers' health insurance. And I would like to yield 3 minutes now to the gentleman from Maryland, the distinguished ranking member of the Committee on Budget, who has tried valiantly to do away with sequestration, Mr. Van Hollen.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the ranking member. Since the very moment the Affordable Care Act was passed, we have heard a massive campaign of misinformation and distortions from our Republican colleagues. From the beginning, we heard about death panels. Then we heard it was going to be the government takeover of health care. That earned them the independent PolitiFact Lie of the Year in the year 2010. And tonight, Mr. Speaker, on the floor, we just hear massive distortions. And what's shameful is that they want to use that now as a cover to shut down the United States government. They want to use that so that tomorrow, millions of Americans can't sign up for access for affordable care. These members of Congress, all of us, we have affordable care, but tomorrow you want to deny that affordable care to millions of Americans and take it away from the millions of Americans who already have protection as a result of the Affordable Care Act. That is shameful. Now, Mr. Speaker, this notion that they're going to go to conference on the continuing resolution is a fig leaf that's not going to get them any political cover. The only way to keep the government open tonight, which is now closed, was to take up the Senate continuing resolution and fund the government. And yes, then we should go to conference on the budget. Mr. Speaker, we've been trying to go to conference on the budget to negotiate our differences since March, when this House passed a budget and the Senate passed a budget. In fact, back in April, myself and our Democratic colleagues introduced a very simple resolution saying that the Speaker should obey the regular order and appoint budget negotiators here from the House to meet with the Senate. What did the Speaker do? Nothing. He blocked the ability to have those budget negotiations. We actually voted on it 3 times in this House. My Republican colleagues voted against the opportunity to appoint budget negotiators. And the United States Senate, what happened? On 18 occasions, Senator Lee and other Republican senators blocked the effort to go to budget negotiations. Now, Senator McCain said that was insane for Republicans in the Senate to do, because he pointed out that our Republican colleagues claimed that they wanted to work on these budget negotiations all along. They said no budget, no pay. What they forgot to tell the American people was they didn't mean a federal budget. They meant the House passes a budget and the Senate passes a budget, but then they were going to block the effort to negotiate the differences. Now, why would you block that, Mr. Speaker? Because when you go to a budget negotiation, you've got to compromise. You've got to meet the other party halfway. And you've got a Tea Party right wing in this House that refuses to compromise. And so what did they say? We're not going to go to conference. We're going to vote 3 times against negotiations. In May, in June, and July, no negotiations. If I could have another 30 seconds.
I'll yield gentleman another half minute.
Gentleman is recognized for 30 seconds.
I thank the gentlelady. So what do you do if you don't want to negotiate, you don't want to compromise? You back the country up against the wall. And here we are. Here we are with that strategy. The idea is, since you don't want to compromise in the regular order, let's try and get what we want by threatening to shut down the United States government. And if that doesn't work, we're going to make sure the United States government can't pay its bills on time, so that we can enact our radical agenda that way, because you're not willing to do it through the regular process of compromise. So nobody should be fooled about this idea of trying to get fig leaf cover and going to conference on this. We should have voted on the bill, kept the government open. It's a shameful day for the United States government, and especially this Congress.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlelady from New York reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thanks very much, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, the Republicans came to the floor of the House several weeks ago. We've done it lots of times. Probably had 41 votes on Obamacare. We've talked about how $716 billion was cut from senior care, Medicare. We think that's a problem. We think that was wrong. We think pushing this off on seniors is the wrong thing to do. We know the cost to employers. We're learning more and more and more about, you know what, Mr. Speaker, it is my time, and I do appreciate, gentlemen, because I know what he's going to tell me. He's going to say, well, we used that money in our budget. In fact, we did. In fact, we did. But you know what,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You did. Thank you. That's exactly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Because this was an action that was done 3 years ago, and we're trying to repeal the bill that took $716 billion from seniors. We disagree with it, but after 3 years, you have to use the money. And so what we're doing is we promised at that time that we would stay after it. So, look, the gentleman is the one that voted for it. Not one Republican voted to take the money. I know what their dialogue is.
And the gentleman yield on that point?
I appreciate the gentleman. He's a very dear friend of mine.
Yeah.
I know they're frustrated when we tell the truth about how bad this bill is. The cost to employers, Delta Airlines, marched up to the White House in February and said, hey guys, just so you know, going to cost Delta Airlines over $100 million this year. The first year, it's going to cost $100 million. Trust me. They were listening over there. That may be why they said, whoops, we'll let business off the hook. They should have done the same thing for everybody. But, Mr. Speaker, that's part of why we're here. We're here for fairness. What do members of Congress hear when they go back home? They hear a lot of things, but here is the one that we hear more than anything. And what we hear about is that there have been 7 part-time jobs created for every 1 full-time job in America. Now, Mr. Speaker, that is not what we were promised. And we talked a lot about what Republicans have said and not said and what's right and wrong. What is true is the President of the United States stood right here and said, not one dime of taxpayer money. And you can keep the insurance that you've got if you want it. That's our promise to the American people. Well, Mr. Speaker, since Obamacare was passed, there have been, for every 7 part-time jobs that were created, only 1 full-time job. We're becoming a part-time job nation. Mr. Speaker, you cannot be the greatest nation in the world as an economic power. You cannot get kids, our young children, to want to go to college for a part-time job. It's just not working well. So that's why the Republican Party is here. That's why we have members here tonight. That's why we've sent 3 CRs. That's why we have meeting after meeting after meeting trying to determine how do we best get after this. We didn't stay after the same way. We sent 1 offer, a 2nd offer, a 3rd offer. We're now asking, very simple, a chance to appoint conferees, get together, face-to-face, talk about the issues and idea, find room for compromise, and do something better. That's what we're asking for. I reserve my time.
Gentleman from Texas reserves his time. The gentlelady from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, although what we're doing here is an exercise in futility, I am pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from New York, the distinguished ranking member of the Committee on Appropriations, Ms. Lowy, who's been doing a wonderful job.
The gentlelady from New York is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, so now Republicans want to negotiate. After the shutdown clock has struck the witching hour, after weeks of making threats, of insisting on your way or the highway, of arrogantly demanding repeal or delay of affordable health care, now the Republicans say, please negotiate. This is not a motion to go to conference or a motion to negotiate. There's no time left for that. This is a motion to shut down our government. There's been plenty of time for negotiation, and Republicans said no at every turn. Forgive me if I remain skeptical that Republicans actually want to negotiate now. Republicans can stop this shutdown right now if they bring to the floor the Senate-passed continuing resolution that removes divisive provisions House Republicans insist upon. This done tonight doesn't do one thing to end the government shutdown. We should call it what it really is, a pathetic last-ditch attempt to not be blamed for a government shutdown. This is too little, too late. We should greet this motion with the same cynicism with which it was offered. I urge my colleagues to vote no.
Gentlelady reserves her time from New York. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to yield 3 minutes to the Dean of the Texas Republican delegation, the gentleman from Ennis, Texas, Congressman Joe Barton.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank the distinguished member of the Chairman of the Rules Committee. I want to rise in support of this resolution. It is past midnight. Officially, the government is shut down. That is not a good thing, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. We have been arguing politically the last several weeks, various proposals to fund the government short-term in a continuing resolution. We've been having some debates on the debt ceiling. If you're like me, most of your constituents, regardless of whether they're Republicans or Democrats, are saying, why can't you guys just get together in Washington and work things out? I think the Republican leadership in the House has been trying to do that. I know there's some disagreement on the other side about that. But in any event, we've come up with this novel idea. Let's go to conference. Now, I know a lot of the junior members on both sides of the aisle don't know what a conference is. But it's where the House Speaker and the House Minority Leader each appoint a certain number of members, normally senior members, of the Committee of Jurisdiction, and the Senate Majority Leader and the Senate Minority Leader appoint members of their respective parties, and if they actually do it according to regular order, lo and behold, the members meet, and they discuss things. House Republicans would put a proposal on the table. House Democrats would. Senate Democrats, Senate Republicans. They'd argue over it and debate it, maybe amend it, and then you take a vote. The House members vote, and if they agree, that's the House position, if a majority agrees. The Senate votes, and if they agree, that's the Senate position. If they don't agree, they have a stalemate. But at least we'd be talking. And it would be members, not leadership, rank-and-file members. And it's just possible, if they open the conference, C-SPAN could cover it. The American people could see what's going on. There's no preordained outcome, Mr. Speaker, but it would be good for democracy. I can see no reason why my friends on the minority side don't want to go to conference with the Senate. I would assume that the distinguished ranking member, Nita Lowey, would head the Democrat conferees. I would assume that Hal Rogers, our committee chairman of the Probes Committee, would head us. That's up to the Speaker and the Minority Leader to appoint that, but I would assume that. I trust them. You know, now we can disagree on what the solution is, But for heaven's sake, I don't see why we can't agree that actually doing what the rules say we should do is somehow partisan and somehow is a negative thing. Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of the rule. I rise in strong support of the resolution that we should go to conference with the other body, hopefully make it an expeditious conference, and work this out. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from Texas reserves. Gentlelady from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, the ranking member of the Appropriations Subcommittee on Commerce, Justice, and Science, Mr. Fattah.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentlelady. I've seen this act before, but most Americans don't recall the shutdown under the Clinton administration. What they recall is the 25 million jobs, moving our economy forward, having peace and prosperity. And I would bet that 20 years from now, this fleeting moment is not going to be recalled by many people in our country. They're going to think about the 42 months of straight employment gains, the return of the housing market, the auto industry, bringing our young people home from Iraq. This majority has managed this brilliantly. Now the Obamacare affordable health care exchanges are open all across the land, but they've managed to shut the national parks and to do a lot of other damage to our reputation even by this meaningless shutdown. Now, Senator Mikulski has said she'd be glad to go to conference once we pass a CR so that the government stays open. What the majority comes to the floor with is, well, we don't want the government to stay open, we want to go to conference. This is not going to work. The Obama record, from eliminating Don't Ask, Don't Tell, to Wall Street reform, to the stimulus, and most importantly, for opening the doors to health care for tens of millions of Americans who've never had the access to be able to go to a marketplace. Those marketplaces are open. They're going to stay open no matter what this majority does, and never again is health care going to be denied to people who are American citizens here in the greatest country on the face of the earth. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania yields back. The gentlelady from New York reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. Our Republican members come from diverse districts all over this country. Men and women get together, we meet, we talk, we have clear voices, but we listen to each other about what people are hearing from back home. One of the clearest voices in that discussion that we've had is a gentleman from Dallas, Texas, who represents a largely rural district, people who get up and go to work every day, people who have a lot at risk, people who care about this country, men and women who provide their children, and their children come and are part of the military. They believe in this country, and they know that America's greatest days need to be in our future, and it requires vigilance, and every day you have to stay after it. And one of the clearest voices is a young man who is the chairman of the Financial Services Committee, the gentleman from Dallas, Texas, and I would like to yield him 4 minutes at this time.
Mr. Henseling, the gentleman from Texas is recognized for 4 minutes.
Well, I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I thank the distinguished chairman of the Rules Committee for bringing us to this point, his leadership in trying to get America back to work, to take us off the road to bankruptcy, and to ensure that there is fairness for all Americans. Because, you know, Mr. Speaker, as I listened to this debate, and I'm sure the Americans perhaps on a little bit more Western time zone hopefully are still following this, but if they are, I understand how they could get confused. But, Mr. Speaker, we're down to only debating 2 different matters here. Should the bosses in America get a better deal than their employees in Obamacare? That's what we're debating here. And more importantly, Mr. Speaker, we are debating, should members of Congress get a better deal than every other American in Obamacare? House Republicans say, no, that's not fair. That's not equal protection under the laws. But yet our friends on the other side of the aisle
are now saying, no, no, no. They're going to protect this sweetheart deal. It's not in the law, ladies and gentlemen, but yet they want to protect this sweetheart deal, and people wonder why there's cynicism about Congress, about why Washington elites get to have a better deal than everybody else because they know more. And so now members of Congress, thanks to the Obama administration, are going to be the only people in America to get subsidies in the Obamacare exchanges? Is this fair? Is this fair, Mr. Speaker? I think not. Clearly, the other side of the aisle wants to preserve this special deal for members of Congress granted by the President of the United States. Where's the fairness in that, Mr. Speaker? Again, and where's the fairness in letting employers, no, we're going to give you a year delay. But no fairness for the people who do the work, pay the taxes, and pull the wagon to make America great. That's what this debate is about. And so here we have one party who, because they won't treat employees as well as their employers, because they are preserving a congressional sweetheart deal, are prepared to shut down the government. That's what we're debating. We got two matters. And, Mr. Speaker, we have come time after time after time in the spirit of negotiation, but no, the President, he'll negotiate with Iranians, he'll negotiate with Syrians, he'll negotiate with Russians, but he will not negotiate with Americans if they happen to be Republicans. No negotiation. Again, is there any surprise that America gets cynical? I mean, why is this, Mr. Speaker? Is it arrogance? Is it hubris? Is it pride? We know that this law apparently is not perfect already. The President has signed several changes into Obamacare. And now we've had delay after delay after delay. Income verification, delayed. High-risk pools, delayed. Out-of-pocket cost limitations, delayed. Small business health options. Just 3 or 4 days ago, as the President was extolling the virtues of the great rollout of Obamacare, 20 minutes later, his own administration announced yet another delay. Small business health options.
Give the gentleman an additional minute. The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
So it seems to me, Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States has perhaps realized that his signature law is not perfect. And all House Republicans are saying in a spending bill, and ladies and gentlemen, this does spend money. This isn't some little sideshow. This is what we do in the Constitution. The Congress has the power of the purse. It's not the power of the rubber stamp. It is the power of the purse. Obamacare is about the purse. And so we're saying two things, Mr. President, in a law that you have already delayed time after time after time. If you're going to delay it for the employers, delay it for the employees. And, Mr. President, how can you decide that members of Congress, to placate them, are going to get a sweetheart deal? This is to end. This has to end, and yet our friends on the other side of the aisle are sitting here defending it, refusing to support a conference. We need fairness for the American people. We need to go to conference in the sweetheart deals. I yield back.
Members are reminded to address all comments to the chair. Gentlelady from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Andrews.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 2 minutes.
I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, over 3 years ago, the House and Senate approved and the President signed the Affordable Care Act. Our friends on the other side said it was unconstitutional. The Supreme Court said they were wrong. They nominated a candidate for President of the United States who said if he was elected, the first thing he would do is repeal the Affordable Care Act. The voters said they were wrong. And tonight their obsession continues, and they have shut down the United States government because of that obsession. The American people will rise up and join us and say, you were wrong twice before, and you're wrong again this time. This is the wrong thing to do for the American public. There's a way out of this debacle. It's to put on the House floor a bill that passed the United States Senate, that the President says he would sign, that most of us believe a majority of this House would vote for right now. So I want to ask the Chairman of the Rules Committee if he would agree with me that the right and decent thing to do is to put on this floor right now the Senate bill so we can have an up or down vote. Will the Chairman agree to do that? I yield.
The House has attempted 3 times to send something over and it's come back rejected every time.
Reclaiming my time, will the Chairman agree that the fair thing to do would be to put the Senate bill on the floor so each member could cast an up or down vote? I yield.
Well, the question I have is, did the Senate pass the bill?
I was reclaiming my time. The Senate passed a bill keeping the government running at your numbers that you wanted in the budget. We are asking, give every member of this House a fair up or down vote on that bill. I yield. Will you do that?
Be in order.
If you will put back in the language that we asked for, we'll be very pleased to agree to it, and I thank the gentleman.
I would ask the gentlelady for 30 more seconds. 15 more seconds.
30.
Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 30 seconds.
My colleagues, Mr. Speaker, when people in politics don't want to say yes or no, they just keep talking. We could do a lot more tonight than just keep talking. We could cast a vote that would say to the American taxpayers, the services you're still paying for, you're going to get tomorrow morning. The absence of that vote from the majority should tell you all you need to know. They're afraid to put that vote on the floor because they would lose. Well, the American people are losing because of their bankrupt and invalid choice. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlelady from New York reserves, and the gentlelady from New York has 7 minutes remaining. The gentleman from Texas is recognized, and the gentleman from Texas has 5 minutes remaining.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. You know, our great government on October the 1st was going to be open for health care. Mr. Speaker, all anybody has to do is go online right now and try and sign up for this after years of our friends in the Obama administration getting ready, and it said, I'm sorry, your account cannot be done. The system is unavailable. So here we are at the great day of October 1st, 12:30, mandatory funding by the government. Can't get in the way of that. Right here. System unavailable for the American public. Why am I not surprised? I reserve my time.
Gentleman from Texas reserves. Gentlelady from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from Texas, our side of the Texan, Ms. Jackson Lee.
Gentlelady from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentlelady. Let me disabuse my good friends of any myth. Right now, the Republicans have shut the government down. SOS message from Texas. We are a diverse state with different opinions. One that says with so many people that need health insurance, we like Obamacare. But another SOS message. Ellington Field right now is shut down. The towers in Ellington Field in Texas are shut down. Why? Because the Republicans are on the floor of the House with a phony procedural vote that is not going anywhere, and the government is shut down. Hundreds of thousands of federal employees shut down. The SBA with no loan shut down. Projects to improve our transportation shut down. Federal economic reports and businesses shut down. Workers in Region 6 offices in the state of Texas shut down. They will not be able to go to work tomorrow. I only hope that we'll have a moment of reconciliation and common sense to speak on behalf of the American people. Please note that Texas recognizes that the American people are important. I don't want a government shutdown. I want to vote on a clean, continuing resolution now.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Gentlelady's time has expired. Gentlelady's time has expired. Gentlelady's time has expired. Gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I reserve my time.
Gentleman reserved. Gentlelady from New York.